everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to do some Triad color mixing using 3 fluorescent acid dye colors. These 3 samples are each a 1% depth of shade of some of Dharma's fluorescent acid dyes: Blacklight blue, fluorescent yellow, and hot fuchsia. Just to show off, bam! Here is our fluorescence. The yellow is a lot brighter than the blue and the pink, but all are absolutely fluorescent. Just throwing a random yarn over here that isn't fluorescent, and you can see. If I move the brightness of the yellow over, you can see the brightness in the blue a little bit better. I did a triad like this with Dharma fluorescent acid dyes, but we didn't have a fluorescent blue. And so let's try this and see what other kinds of fluorescent colors we can mix. Before we get started, there are a few factual moments that are fairly important. One, there isn't a fluorescent blue acid dye molecule. Blacklight blue is a blend of a blue pigment, a blue acid dye, with a colorless fluorescent acid dye molecule. And unfortunately, when you take Blacklight blue and blend it with pinks, that can reduce the amount of fluorescence you can see. Something about these 2 pigments, or really other reds mixed in here, can reduce the amount of fluorescence. That doesn't mean it goes away, it just means that there is less of it. And so we'll see with a few different proportions of these colors mixed together what we might see. This video is not sponsored by Jacquard, but they have sponsored some content for me in the past, and I did receive these dyes for free at one point. If you want to learn more about tools and equipment I'm using in this video, I do have links and affiliate links to everything I'm using, clearly marked down in the video description. For our color mixing today, we're going to dye some Sheila's titanium mini skeins from wool to dye for. These minis are each 20 grams, and they are 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-soak 15 of these mini skeins overnight. The recipe for our color triad looks a little bit different today compared to past ones I've done. And that's because I am reducing the yellow and the pink by half from what I would normally do. So for the primary colors, the Blacklight blue will be at a 1% depth of shade. The pink will be a little bit lighter. It'll be at a 0.5% depth of shade, as will our neon yellow that is just peeking in from the top. The reason why I'm choosing to do things this way is because the Blacklight blue has so much less blue pigment in it that I know it'll get overwhelmed very quickly by the pink and the yellow. And so this way we can get more of a feel of what the colors look like mixed with the blue, and they might still overwhelm it. So we might need to adjust this further. In general, I don't like to do this with my color mixing. I like to have all of our corners at the same strength because that gives me a better overall intuitive feel of how much of each color I might need to get a desired result. But knowing how pale this is, I think that this works the best. And so all of the numbers that you see here represent the milliliters of a 1% dye stock we will be adding to the respective containers. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to start making our 1% stock solutions to do our color mixing. I know from the plan that I made, I'm going to need 100 milliliters, or the equivalent of 1 gram of Blacklight blue for this project, and the equivalent of 50 milliliters of a 1% stock solution, or 0.5 grams of our yellow and pink. However, I always like to measure out more dye than I need, especially when I'm doing a color mixing project, because if you make a mistake when adding the dyes and have to redo one, you need to have excess dye on hand. But also, because of margin of error, if I am trying to bring a volume up to 100 milliliters, it's possible that maybe I'm only at 98. And so I could end up being short. What if I overmeasure with one of my syringes? And so I could be short in the end as well. And so it's better to have a little bit extra dye that you can use for another project than not have enough. I measured out 2.5 grams of the Blacklight blue acid dye and dissolved that in a total volume of 250 milliliters of liquid using hot tap water. For the pink and the yellow, I measured out 2 grams of dye and dissolved those in 200 milliliters of water for the total volume of dye plus water to again have our 1% stock solutions. I have my plan of how I want to add these dyes. And so I got out some graduated syringes and started adding the dye to my various containers. Each of these 15 takeout containers contains 1 cup of water and no acid yet. And so I added for the Blacklight blue, starting with 20 milliliters, then 15, 10, 5, going down the diagonal. And then with the pink and the yellow, I started with 10 milliliters, then 7.5, 5, and 2.5. Once I had finished adding all of the color, I stirred things up. And then before we add the yarn, there's a little something I want to do. A lot of times when I do a triad, the blue is the dominant color, and we'll see like a big triangle here that feels very blue focused. Today, I would say that the hot fuchsia is a dominant color. Like this triangle all feels a lot more red compared to what we have over here. But all of the colors where we mixed Blacklight blue with any amount of pink feel a bit muddier. They don't feel as clear as some of those other colors. And so that is a little bit interesting to me. But what I want to do now is go get the Blacklight. I turned off the overhead light, which doesn't do that much, and I'm bringing over my Blacklight to see. Ooh. Oh, that is fun. That is fun. Okay. So right away, and the light is right here, we see the fluorescence. Oh, look at those greens and the yellow. That's amazing. And let's go over here and see, we definitely have fluorescence in the pink and in these oranges. Yellow is very, very bright. Now when it comes to our center, we do still feel, I still feel fluorescence in these 3. But the containers do look milkier. Like the color in there just feels a little bit milkier. I'm just excited to see what the yarns will look like and that we can bring in. Now as for these more muddy colors, when I put the Blacklight over it, we do have one that feels blue, one that feels green, and one that feels more orangey. But we're gonna need to add the yarn to see more. I'm actually gonna start adding the yarn to the middle. So it's funny because when I put the Blacklight on, this one felt very blue. It doesn't look blue right now. My tap water is slightly acidic, and so I do want to note that, but I will be using a spoon to push these in. I have not otherwise added acid in here yet. We'll bring out the Blacklight again in a little bit, but we're gonna add one to Blacklight blue. These other colors, I know exactly what they will look like because we've done that a lot. But I think, I don't know if I still have the yarn easily accessible to compare the difference of this bottom row. If I were to compare the combination of, say, a turquoise blue to the hot fuchsia, if I were going to compare that to the combination of Blacklight blue to the hot fuchsia, which this color right here does remind me of Purple Pop a little bit from Dharma. But Dharma's Purple Pop does not have, it has some blue pigments in there, but it's not a fluorescent, they don't have a fluorescent blue. I mean, a fluorescent blue acid dye, again, does not exist. Blacklight blue is a combination of a fluorescent, colorless acid dye with some blue pigment. Okay. Amazing how sometimes things are perceived when you have just the Blacklight. Ooh, this is a very pretty berry color right here, which goes to show that if you have brighter, more neon colors, you can mix more muted things with them, taking advantage of the color wheel. before even going and getting the other yarn, it's funny the change. Like visually, this looks like a warm brown. I bring the Blacklight over and it feels like a periwinkle. Like the color I'm seeing is just completely different. Like it's a huge transformation under the Blacklight. Now I do see some glow with that purple, but not as much as what I see over here on the blue. And also not as much as what I see over on that pink. It's definitely reduced, but it's not completely quenched, which was one of the concerns that Jacquard had. And so I can see why they wouldn't make a purple and market it as a fluorescent purple when it doesn't stand up to the other colors in terms of brightness. Because sometimes with some colors you can see the fluorescence in there under a black light when they're by themselves, but not when they're next to a yellow, for example, because fluorescent yellow is the brightest. Now, one problem that I have is that when it comes to ratios, it's a little bit less simple because I've doubled the amount of blue. For example, this green right here has 2.5 milliliters of the yellow and 15 milliliters of blue. So the percentage of each would be hard for me to say off of the top of my head. Except I guess I could say it's 1 part yellow, 6 parts blue. I guess I can say that. But even that doesn't feel very teal. We definitely have differences in our greens here, but the differences between them aren't, we would have to use way less yellow compared with that blue to get a neon feeling teal color. But I will say that which one of these is going to feel the most like chartreuse, which is fluorescent. I think that we have demonstrated here that mixing black, light blue, and like chartreuse doesn't have any of the colorless fluorescent acid dye pigment, but I think the mixture here does not reduce the amount of fluorescence that you see in the same way as mixing the blue with the pink, which to this date I've only shown briefly through dip dyeing. Now, I would say that these colors here are very, very pretty. I don't know yet how I will sort of sort these into sets. But I would say of these, maybe this one here is looking a little bit like fluorescent red. This gives us a really nice orange here as well. I don't think I'm gonna need to label the lids. I think I'll be able to figure out where everything goes. But I would say that these purples here are lovely. They are lovely. They just aren't gonna glow quite as much. Let's bring over the Blacklight again. And this isn't giving us the clearest picture of everything. There is still some fluorescence there. It's amazing how the color changes and how those oranges aren't showing up as much on camera, but they are, the fluorescence is there. I'm so curious what this will look like once we're done. But now we're gonna need to add acid and finish off the yarn. I added 1 teaspoon of white vinegar to each of the containers, gently stirred it up, making sure to wipe off my spoon in between different colors to avoid color transfer. And then I put lids on the containers and set it aside for a couple of days to let the colors absorb. Don't worry about the numbers on the lids of the containers. I knew I would be able to put things back in the right order, and so I didn't feel like trying to find numbers 1 through 15 to have this be a little bit easier. If I need to, I can steam set yarn inside these containers, but also I know a cold process does work with these pigments, so we'll just see how this goes. It's about 3 days later, and now I am going to remove the lids so we can take a look at our yarn. Here is our yarn, and the colors are so pretty. Oh my goodness. It is so fun to see the yarn once the dye has absorbed, because it does end up feeling different from the way it did when we just had yarn in with dye. Now, we do have some color left behind in some, maybe not that one, but in some of these containers. Let's see, our blue, maybe a hint, but most of all the color is in our yarn. And I've done cold process with Blacklight blue in the past, and I believe that there should be minimal of the colorless fluorescent pigment that we can't see left in the dye bath. I believe most of that has also absorbed. Okay, now we still have a lot of ambient light in here, but I'm bringing over the Blacklight, and oh my gosh, check out all the glow down here. Now granted, the light is right here right now, but let's see if I bring it over to this side near the pink, we also feel a lot of glow. Now these purples down here near the bottom do have some fluorescence to them compared to something that had no fluorescence at all. It's just less compared to those greens. And these colors in the middle, they still glow like a color that looks very different from how they look regularly. Like they look brown, but they glow. This one almost glows like a gray, pink and yellow. And that's likely because the fluorescent blue pigment, I think, glows a little bit like a white, even though it might look bluish. But anyway, let me see. I won't be able to remove a lot of light from here. Once the yarn is dry, we'll try to go ahead and bring it someplace where we can isolate maybe this section of the triangle to look at it without the brightness of some of these yellows. But now it's time to start steam setting. I'm planning on setting up my steamer basket for the first round as follows. I am going to steam the yellow on its own, so that way we don't get any color transfer onto it. I'm also going to steam set our Blacklight blue on her own, just because, why not? And then on one side of our basket, I'm going to place our greens. And on the other side, I'm going to put our oranges. And then I will, once this has steam set for 30 minutes, I will add the rest of the yarn into our steamer basket. And I have a feeling I might keep the pink on its own while we go steam, but this is our first basket. I'll steam for 30 minutes. Shoot. I thought it seemed a little small. It's too bad I wasn't filming, because when I went to go stick this in, I dunked it. So not ideal. And what I might do in a moment, once I remove the rest of the yarn from these containers, is I might pour some of this water over it, so that way we have more acid on those minis again. But oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so sad I wasn't filming that. So the reason why I'm keeping some of these separate is, one, because of color transfer, but really I also know that colorless blue pigment can make our pink less bright, and so I don't really want to touch it with these other colors. But actually, in a moment, I can bring the Blacklight over and we can look at these, because why not? We now have the brightest colors removed. All right, let's see. Woohoo! So see, there's no question we have fluorescence in here. It's just less. All of these that have a combination of pink and blue, the fluorescence that we have is less than what we have in just the pink alone or the blue alone. So the combination is not quite as bright and vibrant. And that's why Jacquard recommends not mixing them. Of course, you're welcome to mix them, but it's just the recommendation that it could kill the fluorescence. And so is it killed completely? No. Is it reduced? Yeah. But I still think, looking at these three under the Blacklight, and I think what's on camera is very accurate here. How I see almost a pink, a blue, a yellow. And yes, the only difference is the blue. We really feel a blue here under the black light, and so that just amuses me. It amuses me. But anyway, I will be back once I've finished steam setting the first round, and we'll reset the bucket. I actually have one last thing to do, and that is because we have some color left in here. Now, I see maybe a tiny hint of fluorescence here, but it's nothing like, yeah, you can see those pinks glow a little bit, and maybe this little blue down here, but it's nothing compared to what the yarn is doing or what the dye did before we had the yarn, so I'm not gonna worry about that. The one thing that does feel a little odd to me is that our pinks seem to feel dark and then lighter and lighter and lighter. And what's odd about that is that the pinks were the darkest and then they got lighter, lighter, lighter going on these diagonals, not those rows. Unless I completely messed up, which I don't believe that I did, because things seem to look the way I would have expected if I did the triangle correctly. So I don't know what that's about, if it has to do with the proportion of pink with other colors, but this is just an odd coincidence. Or maybe it has to do with the amount of yellow that we had, because this is where the yellow goes, and so maybe the more yellow that is present, but wait, that would be less yellow. Yeah, maybe the more yellow is present, the more pink we can also bind. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you there, but it's interesting, and if you have a hypothesis, let me know in the comments. But anyway, in 30 minutes, we'll be back at the steamer basket. It has been 30 minutes, and I'm popping out the yarn. I did not burn myself, but you should probably use tongs. This is when it's a circumstance of do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, I'm popping that first batch aside to cool, and you will note that I never added more acid on it. Like I said I was going to. I think it should be okay. The pink went into the same container as the yellow, so we're not going to have any of the colorless blue pigment get on it. I mean, I'm being overly cautious, careful for the demonstration purposes. Otherwise, I would not put the pink on its own. But anyway, I'm going to steam set this for 30 minutes. Then I'll remove the yarn, set it aside, and next time you see me, we'll start washing it. Let's wash all of our rainbow yarn. I'm going to add some dish soap to this bin of water. And I'm going to be very optimistic that we're not going to see bleeding. So cross your fingers for me as we look and see. There is a hint, but that hint of color that I see in here is less than what we saw in the containers earlier. And so that, my friends, is really, really good. Let's see now. I mean, I would say that we're really, really good. Very minor, if anything. I'm going to rinse this a couple more times, then put the yarn through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. Let's finally take a look at our color mixing triad. This triangle, I did not mix things evenly. Here we have a 1% depth of shade of Blacklight blue, a 0.5% depth of shade of Fluorescent yellow, and a 0.5% depth of shade of hot fuchsia. But all three of these colors are fluorescent. They all glow. The yellow glows the most, maybe then the pink, then the blue, but they all do glow. If this was a regular triad color mixing video, I would go from here to then show the midpoints of all the colors. But that's not actually a 1-to-1 ratio of all of the colors. So I'm gonna lay out the whole triangle and then bring back up our recipe guide so that way you can get a feel for those recipes again. Those middle colors, and maybe like circle them. Between the pink and the yellow, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. But between the blue and the other two colors, at that midpoint, it's 2 parts blue, 1 part either yellow or pink. This is actually the order I should have been showing the 3 colors. Bam. Oh, Blacklight. So cool. Here is our triangle. I would say our brightest neon feeling colors would be everything from our blue to our yellow, from our pink to our yellow. And then this inner triangle here feels a lot more muted to me. This is a very pretty purple. It does not feel neon. I think that it would need to be significantly more concentrated to feel bright and neon. We may or may not go into the closet. But now here we are with the black light, and you can see that those greens and the yellow are by far the brightest. Which isn't to say that the pink and the blue aren't also fluorescent, because they are. It's just you'll notice that everything on that outer upside down V is very bright, and everything in that inner triangle is a lot more muted. As much as I don't want to transfer this into the closet, I think that I need to, so that way we can remove more light. I brought the yarn in on a lid. We'll see if this works. Oh, it does. Oh, good. The lid does not reflect any color. Oh, that's great. And so now I have removed almost all of the white light, and we're looking at this yarn just with the black light. I would say the dimmest of our samples would be the 3 in the middle, and then this purple right here. The more pink we add, the more fluorescence we see again. But the mixture between the black light blue and pink definitely does dim the amount of fluorescence, which is consistent with the information I had from Jacquard. I want to take a moment to focus on these 3 colors in the center, because look at how they appear under the black light. I would say this one, on camera it looks a little bit blue. In person it feels a little bit pink and yellow. Here this one feels a little bit orange. This one feels a little bit sort of coral. But when I bring back the very yellow light in my closet, the colors look nothing like what they do under the fluorescence. And so that just, I find that really interesting. And I have a hypothesis for what's happening, but let's get back out of the closet. I'm keeping the lid that I use for transport. Under white light, like we're using right now, we see a combination of 3 pigments: a yellow pigment, a pink pigment, and a blue pigment. Under the black light, we're seeing the fluorescence of a combination of 3 pigments: a yellow pigment, a pink fluorescent pigment, and then a colorless fluorescent pigment, which I suppose is more white. And so that addition makes things feel a little bit more pastel. But then when we're looking at these 3 colors, whatever blue is in there that's making them more muted and more brown isn't fluorescent and isn't really coming through. And I think that's why they appear so different when we bring in that black light. The whole thing ultimately is so odd. But I would say this one right here is a really neutral, almost camel color that is really quite lovely. I need to go twist up these mini skeins, but before I do, I have to say that I am excited to mix up my own custom greens and oranges and reds that are fluorescent using these 3 colors. When it comes to purples, I think it's still the best bet is to add a little bit of just a blue pigment to a hot fuchsia or a fluorescent fuchsia versus trying to mix it with black light blue, because the pinks that we get in the middle here don't feel that neon to me, but also they're less fluorescent. And so I think at some point I want to play around with adding turquoise to pink and seeing if that ends up feeling less bright, less fluorescent, like this. And so I don't know if I would do a side-by-side comparison or what, but I am certainly interested in investigating that more in the future. And it's possible that some of these purples would feel more neon if I used a lot more dye. So that is definitely possible. But I would say overall that, again, what the Jacquard dye chemists told me, that mixing the colorless fluorescent acid dye with reds and pinks really does reduce that fluorescence, and I'm feeling that here. I just don't know how much it's coming through on camera, but I feel it. All right, here we have our colors that we mixed from blue to pink. And now you can see that we have the most fluorescence on either edge. These three colors under the Blacklight almost feel chalky. They feel a lot less vibrant than either the Blacklight blue or the hot fuchsia. Of course, there is still fluorescence in there. It's just diminished. This might not be a complete rainbow set. Our blue is a little underrepresented, and the transition between, say, the blue and the yellow, those greens are all very close to one another, but it is still absolutely gorgeous. Oh, I love it. The neutrals are cute too. I just had to take a moment with just our rainbow. But now I need to try to separate this into some mini skein sets, and that's gonna be hard. Here we go. These three sets are pretty cute. I think each of them work nicely. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you found this video helpful and informative. I am really glad that I used more blue than the other colors, except for the fact that I can't look at these colors and at this triangle and instantly know the proportions of each of the colors that I used, in the same way I can with the other triangles. And so it's useful, but it doesn't give me the same innate feel as I have with other primary triads I've done to know how to mix them to get the colors I want. But that's not a bad thing. Anyway, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I usually post twice a week, sometimes more, and we have a lot of fun here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.